Welcome to Las Vegas Tonight with your award-winning host, Dale Davidson. Dale interviews fascinating guests from top-ranked celebrities to people just like you who have an important story to tell. For more than 15 years, Dale has broadcast every week from the fabulous Las Vegas Strip. He finds the people who really make Las Vegas a one-of-a-kind city and lets the world know just what's happening in this remarkable town. You'll discover why 50 million people visit the entertainment capital of the world every year. Stay tuned for another exciting episode of Las Vegas Tonight.
Welcome to Las Vegas Tonight. I'm your host, Dale Davidson. Each and every episode, we bring you fascinating, interesting guests, and we've outdone ourselves this time. Dr. Anthony Levatino is with us. He is a famous doctor and an attorney, I understand.
Yes.
So he's a smart guy, and we're going to talk about the pro-life movement. He is a former abortionist who has gone over to the bright side, and he is doing everything he can to stop it. Doctor, thanks for coming.
Pleasure.
We appreciate it so much. And you're an Arizonan.
Yes,
so you came up for Arizona
for the last 2 years.
Yeah, and you like it okay, even though it's a little hot.
It's a little warm. Well, everyone complained about, I lived in Las Cruces, New Mexico for 16 years. And everybody goes, well, it's so hot. And I go, well, it's only 4 to 5 degrees difference. No, it's a lot hotter. And especially the elevation's not so high, so it doesn't cool down at night like it used to.
Yes, that's the case. Let's talk a little bit about your early life so people get to know you. Where'd you grow up?
Grew up in Rochester, New York.
Oh, okay.
Went to Spencerport High School, and then decided fairly early on, about age 10, I woke up once with a lump under my arm, and I had to go to the hospital to have whatever this was removed.
Yes.
I thought it was a great adventure. My poor parents were sweating out leukemia, lymphomas, and all these things. I had no idea what they were worried about.
Yes.
Turned out to be nothing.
Yeah.
But that somehow got me thinking about I wanted to become a doctor. So
that's interesting.
After I graduated from high school, I went to Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in Troy, New York.
Oh, I know
They
Rensselaer,
had a special, it's a great place. Mm-hmm. Mostly known as an engineering college.
Yes.
But had a special medical program that allowed you had to go through your summers as well, but you could get your college degree and medical degree in 6 years instead of 8.
Wow.
So I did that and graduated from RPI and Albany Medical College in 1976.
Wow, good for you. And when did you decide to become an attorney? When did that happen?
Well, after I got through medical school, I decided I wanted to do obstetrics and gynecology, and that's 4 more years.
Right.
When I graduated from my residency program in obstetrics and gynecology, my wife and I had 2 babies and $28 to our name. And I was foolish enough to tell her, I said, I think it would really be interesting to get a law degree. And after she finished choking me and saying, no, you're going to go to work.
The sooner the better.
Exactly. I practiced for 10 years.
Yes.
And then, we had enough pennies in the bank at that point where, we started talking about it. And she said, if you want to go to law school, go ahead. So I went to law school between 1990 and 1993 to get my law degree at Albany Law School in Albany, New York.
Yeah, and you went to Albany Medical College as well,
Albany
right?
Medical College is right across the street. They're both affiliated with Union University.
Okay. Let's talk about your career as an MD. What brought you to obstetrics and gynecology? What was there about that practice that really appealed to you?
A lot of people wonder about that, and especially why would men want to get involved in obstetrics and gynecology. But physicians have personalities and different personalities maybe tend to gravitate toward specific professions or in medicine specific specialties.
Sure.
I was the kind of guy, I don't particularly like puzzles, so internal medicine wasn't a great appeal to me.
Oh, okay. Putting pieces back together.
I liked using my hands, so surgery as a broad category made sense. I looked at plastics, I looked at eyes, I looked at general surgery. But when I did my obstetrics and gynecology rotation, I just found it fascinating.
Really?
To me, it was so much more fun saying, it's a boy, it's a girl, rather than, your mom's really sick and maybe you should get in here.
Yeah.
I really found that very rewarding and really enjoyed it. So when it came time to pick a specialty, I said, no, I'm going to go into obstetrics and gynecology.
But you were adamantly pro-choice would be the way to describe it. Is that fair?
Yeah, it is fair. When I graduated from medical school in 1976, I mean, if you had asked me how I felt about the abortion issue, I wouldn't have hesitated for a second to tell you I am pro-choice. This is a decision between a woman and her doctor, and nobody, fortunately, including the baby's father, has anything to say about it.
Right.
You know, a lot of people identify themselves as pro-life or pro-choice. But for some people, it doesn't really affect their lives directly. It doesn't even affect how they vote. But when you're an obstetrician gynecologist and you say you're pro-choice, this isn't just some vague political position. You have to decide whether you're going to actually learn to do and then perform abortions on live patients.
Right.
So as part of my training in obstetrics and gynecology, I learned to do first and second trimester abortions.
Wow, wow. And second trimester abortions are pretty brutal, aren't they?
All of them are pretty brutal, but it's even easier to see in a second trimester.
Yeah.
Pregnancy is divided into three almost equal trimesters.
Right.
So the first trimester is up till about from last period, that's how we count, until about 13 weeks. Second trimester is from 13 weeks to 27 weeks, and then third trimester is 27 weeks till term, which is 40 weeks. We were doing, in the hospital, we were doing, at the time, in the late 70s, we were doing saline abortions in the second trimester. These aren't done anymore, but suffice it to say that these women had to go through labor. And it was pretty difficult. I mean, these kids were virtually always born dead. You know, the saline did a number on them.
Yes.
And it's a hard kind of practice. But I was dedicated, and first trimester abortions at the time, there was no medical abortions at the time. We were doing suction D&C abortions. And
I see.
when it was my turn to do them, I would do 2, 3, 4 in the morning, never thought anything of it.
Yes. What changed your mind? What was there a revelation that came to you saying this is a baby and I should not be doing this?
There's not an obstetrician in the world that doesn't know that this is a baby. So it's not that kind of revelation.
Yeah.
My wife and I, we married when I was in my first year of training. And like a lot of young couples, we wanted to have a family of our own. And
Sure.
unfortunately found out pretty quickly that we had an infertility problem. She just wasn't getting pregnant.
Right.
I sent her to the best infertility expert in town.
Yep.
And any woman who's been through an infertility workup knows that it is expensive, it is difficult, it is painful, it is embarrassing. And you see, when we first dated, even long before we got married, I mean, we made a very fundamental mistake in our relationship because she was pro-life. Here I am doing abortions. And when we found out pretty quickly we were on opposite sides of the fence, and rather than discussing it or hashing it out, we ignored it. And that set up a pattern that persisted for way too long in our relationship. Well, here we are now trying to have a child of our own. She went through one surgical procedure, a lot of tests, and her infertility expert came to us one day and said, look, I can do one more surgical procedure to try to fix things. It should take about an hour and a half. And when he walked out of the operating room 4.5 hours later, I can still see him. I can see that room. He walked up to me and said, look, I never tell anyone that they're not going to be able to have a child of their own, but don't count on it.
Right.
This was, I came from a big Italian family. She came from a big Irish family. Having kids was what you do.
Yeah.
So obviously, once we got over that shock, we decided to adopt a child. And through a tremendous amount of effort, we went to state agencies, county agencies, religious agencies. I mean, anybody who's tried to adopt a baby knows how difficult it is.
Yeah, I know it is.
And
yes.
The best we could do after a lot of effort was to get on a 5-year waiting list, to get on the real waiting list.
Wow.
It was after months of that I came up with we've been married over 42 years now, but my wife still credits as the best idea I've ever come up with beside marrying her. And that was, we were getting frustrated with the normal channels.
Sure,
and I said,
yeah.
This is ridiculous. I know 50 obstetricians on a first name basis. I work with them every day. Let's just advertise and maybe we'll get lucky and be able to get a private adoption. And that's what we did. In August of 1978, I was working in the operating room with one of the attending physicians, and the circulating nurse tapped me on the shoulder, and she was holding up a piece of paper that said, call Marcia as soon as you're done.
Now, Marcia was the head of social services at Albany Medical Center where I was working.
Right.
And she's one of the people we had talked to when we advertised that we were looking for a baby. That's all the note said, but I knew what it meant. And sure enough, she informed me that there was a 15-year-old girl in labor in the delivery room, had no prenatal care. The first time she saw a baby was the day before, or first time she saw a doctor was the day before.
Wow.
But, you know, she's in good health and the baby looks healthy and she wants to give her baby up for adoption. Are you interested? Well, of course I was interested. I remember staring at the face of the telephone to call my wife with this news and know I was just 7 digits away from becoming a father.
Yeah.
And literally, by the grace of God, we were able to adopt a little girl that we named Heather in 1978.
What a blessing.
So here we go now. We've got a baby of our own. You know, after all the doubts and all the, you know, all the tears, now we have a baby, and my wife got pregnant the very next month. And we ended up with my son Sean was born the following year, and Heather and Sean
that
were only
often
10 months
happens,
apart.
doesn't it?
It happens. It's statistically, I'm supposed to tell you as a doctor, no, that doesn't really matter. But yeah, we all see it.
And that was such a joy in your life, wasn't it? And you suffered a tragedy with this young girl, didn't you?
We did. You know, it's the first. I was, as I said, I was pro-choice. This was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
No one does things that they think are wrong.
Sure.
But I was dedicated to this. I thought it was the absolutely right thing for myself and my patients. The first time I had any doubts about abortion was when we were trying to adopt a child. I'm no idiot. I know why there's no babies to adopt.
Yes.
And I had some doubts about it because it was like, gosh, I'm throwing these kids in the garbage, and here I am trying to find a child that I can bring home and call my own. And those were the very first doubts. But when we had Heather and then got Sean soon afterward, those doubts simply went away, and I went back to business as usual. In June 23rd, 1984 was a beautiful day in Albany, New York, where we were living at the time. I was on call, but it wasn't too busy. I made rounds that morning and got to spend the day with my family, and we took the kids to an amusement park that afternoon. We had dinner together, and then the kids were playing in the backyard when we had friends come over for cake and coffee. And we were talking with our friends, and at 7:25 that night, we heard the screech of brakes out in front of our house. We went out and found out the kids had gone in the road and Heather had been hit by a car.
Oh, Lord.
She was a mess. You know, I'm a doctor. I'm supposed to be able to save people's lives. My wife was an intensive care nurse. I mean, we did this for a living.
Yes.
But it made absolutely no difference, and she died in our arms in the back of an ambulance.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
You know, anyone who has kids may think they have some idea of what it's like to lose a child that way. If you haven't lost a child yourself, you have no idea what it feels like, and I hope you never find out.
Yes.
But what do you do after a disaster? You bury your child, you take some time off, and then you try to get into your life. Mm-hmm. In private practice, I was doing second trimester D&D abortions. These are very brutal abortions where you're literally tearing these kids limb from limb. And there's no other way to do it. You're dismembering. That's why it's called a dismemberment abortion.
Right.
It was maybe a couple of weeks, you know, after I went back to work. I don't remember exactly how long it was, but I showed up at OR number 9 at Albany Medical Center just like I had over 100 times before for a second trimester D&E abortion. And I started, you know, I wasn't thinking of this as anything special. I had other things on my mind. And I started that abortion and used an instrument called a Sofer clamp. This is the very same instrument I used. Reached in and literally ripped out an arm or a leg and just stared at it in the clamp and got sick. You know, but once you start an abortion, you can't stop. Believe it or not, the doctor who does an abortion has to keep inventory. You have to make sure that you get 2 arms, 2 legs, and all the pieces. Because if you don't, your patient will come back infected, bleeding, or seriously ill, or even dead. So I finished that abortion, and I know it sounds strange to people, but I always promise them what I'm telling you is firsthand and true. For the first time in my career, after all those years, over 1,200 abortions, I looked. I mean, I really, truly looked at that pile of body parts on the table. And I didn't see her wonderful right to choose, and I didn't see what a great doctor I was helping her with her problem. And I didn't even see the $800 cash I just made in 15 minutes. All I could see was somebody's son or daughter. And suddenly it was looking very, very different to me.
I'll bet it did. We have to take a very brief break. We'll be back with Dr. Anthony Levatino in just a couple of minutes. Thank you for watching Las Vegas Tonight. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Las Vegas Tonight. Dr. Anthony Levatino is with us. Fascinating man, a former abortionist who is now very much pro-life. Speaking of which, I saw the movie you were in. I was not surprised at how well you did because you were reenacting what you used to do for a living, but it was very believable. I thought you were an actor at first. So the movie's called Unplanned. And do people recognize you from the movie?
Well, it was funny. It was I could tell you a few unplanned stories if you have the time.
Sure.
One of the writer-directors called me.
Yeah.
And he explained that they were doing the project. I'd read the book, and I knew that somebody had purchased the rights to the book, but I had no idea.
Right.
And he told me that they were shooting this picture finally, and they wanted me to play the role of the abortionist. And I laughed and I said, I'm not an actor. I mean, I have no acting experience. He said, we've seen your stuff. We know you'll do okay. So I was like, okay, So
that's great.
My wife and I went to Stillwater, Oklahoma, where they were shooting this movie. It was a really interesting experience. They told us a lot of interesting stories. I mean, the original budget for the movie was $6 million. I mean, it did extremely well at the box office.
I know it did, yeah.
These are huge gambles financially.
Always,
millions of dollars are being risked. Here they were 4 days before they started production. They didn't even have their lead actress. I mean, Ashley Bratcher was at the bottom of their pile of people to ask. And
is that right?
4 days before they started shooting, when they spoke to her and said, "This is our actress." But anyway, spent the time on the set. It was fascinating. The nurse in that scene, it was, so I am a former abortion doctor who played an abortion doctor.
Right.
The nurse in that scene was a former abortion nurse who played an abortion nurse.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, a lot of people didn't know that.
Yeah.
And it was very interesting. Ashley, when she got this part, this is a big deal to any actress to get a movie part like this. And,
absolutely.
And she's starred in several things. But she called her mother to tell her that she had a part for this movie, and her mom was like, and Ashley's told this story, so I know I can. They said, "Sweetheart, there's something you don't know." And it turned out that Ashley herself was almost aborted. Her mother had an abortion, had an appointment at an abortion clinic.
Wow.
And then changed her mind at the last minute at the clinic, and this is the only reason Ashley was even alive.
That's an incredible story.
You're playing a role, of course, and again, I'm not a professional actor, and the directors were terrific. and they really did direct. And they were feeding me, we were trying some different lines out. That Beam Me Up Scotty line, I'm glad, it's the one that was used in the movie.
Yes.
And I'm glad they used that because that was what the abortionist that was working with Abby Johnson actually said that day. But they tried a couple of other different, several other different lines just to try them out. The beauty of editing, and you appreciate that.
Yes, I
television.
do. Yes.
And I'm throwing out these horrible, callous lines to the camera, and the camera's looking at me. Ashley is 3 feet away from me, but she's facing me, so the camera can't see her. But I'm throwing these lines out, and the tears are running down her face. It was really interesting. There was a husband and wife minister team on set praying the whole time. It was another interesting story was at the end of the movie when the Planned Parenthood sign is pulled down. If people go and look if you look at that scene, do you recognize the guy who was driving the tractor?
No, I didn't.
That's Mike Lindell. He's the My Pillow guy.
Oh, is that right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Go take a look at that.
Okay. How great is that?
They had this budget put together. They started shooting the movie. Mike had apparently heard about the project, called the writer-directors, and he said, and they never met before. And this is the story they told us.
Yes.
And he said they'd never met before. And he said, "I'm sending you. He sent me your bank account. I'm sending you your bank account number. I'm sending you $1 million." And they were like, "Well, we've never met. We need contracts." He goes, "You're not listening to me. Send me your bank account number. I'm sending you $1 million." That's how he got involved in the movie.
Oh, that's great.
And then it was like, well, we've got to give him a role, so they put him in the. So take a look at that scene. You'll
I will recognize
it's Mike Lindell there.
Oh, that's great. He's a good Christian guy.
It was an excellent movie, I thought. It's Abby Johnson's story. Obviously, it's not very complimentary to Planned Parenthood, but that is her story. That is her experience as she relates it that she went through. She worked, and Abby and I share something in common. I mean, she was as dedicated to the idea of family planning and abortion as I was once upon a time.
Yeah, she was an employee of the year with Planned Parenthood.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I thought the movie did a good job of showing that story. And and she had the experience that many other people have too. When you actually see an abortion, I mean, it's one thing to talk about it. It's something else to actually see it. It's something else as a human being to do it with your own hands.
Yes.
And in the end, it changed everything for her.
Yeah. She spoke at the First Choice Pregnancy Services fundraiser last year, so I had an opportunity to meet her and hear her testimony, which was terrific. You're speaking there tonight, I understand.
Yes.
Yeah. And that is that something you do all the time now? Do you go to crisis pregnancy centers? 5
or 6 times a year.
Do you?
We get out and talk. My wife and I have for years, and we feel it's very important to support pregnancy assistance centers like First Choice.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going to happen in the next election. We'll see. But the atmosphere and the environment for pro-life causes and pregnancy centers could become very rough in the next few years. The court may change. The court may get stacked. There's a lot of things that can happen. We can talk all day about politics, and that's not why we're here. But I think that what's going to come out of this in the long run, no matter who wins, is that pregnancy centers like First Choice are so absolutely vitally important for women to get the information they need to make an informed choice.
In the movie, it was pretty clear that Planned Parenthood was in the business of abortion. That's really what it was about. It wasn't so much that it was family planning. It wasn't so much that it was assistance in women's medical care. They were in the business of abortion. What's your feeling about Planned Parenthood and its role in abortions across the country today?
Planned Parenthood does a lot. Abortion is not all they do.
Right.
But it is a huge part of what they do. And I believe it is the largest, it accounts for the largest percentage of their clinical income that they actually bring in. I think I looked at the figures just recently, and I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I believe in the latest report, Planned Parenthood brought in through medical services, largely abortion, something in the area of $379 million. They get about $500 million in contributions.
Right.
They get over $600 million in tax money. And on that 1.2 or 1.3 billion, whatever that comes to, they make about $110 million profit. That is, and Planned Parenthood does pelvic exams, they do pap smear screenings, they do breast exams, they do contraception, including all types of contraception, and yes, abortion is a big part of their services. In the end, ultimately, Planned Parenthood is the single largest abortion provider in the country. So it is certainly a very big percentage of what they do.
It's considered to be a political issue because it ends up in the Supreme Court most of the time. Roe v. Wade in 1973 determined that a woman's right to privacy included abortion. What is your feeling on the religious aspects of people's choice to abort or not abort versus the political issues involved?
I'm not sure I know exactly what you're asking.
Yes.
Different religions take different views as far as abortion is concerned.
Yes.
Obviously. I mean, my wife and I were attending a Presbyterian USA church when I was doing abortions. They had absolutely no problem with that.
Yeah.
When I stopped doing abortions, you know, suddenly it was like, am I comfortable in a church that supports abortion? I mean, even, you know, and I'm the one who flipped, not them.
Right.
And ultimately, we left that church exactly for that reason.
Yes.
As I said, other churches and other different branches of religion take their own views. As for the politics, it's become very politically charged. Obviously, it's always been a political thing, and it's going to stay that way.
Yeah.
The Brett Kavanaugh hearings. I mean, does
That's
anyone?
really what was behind that.
All of the things that happened to Brett Kavanaugh and his family and what they were put through. I can't believe no one could possibly be so naive to understand that all of that, every shred of it, happened because of Roe versus Wade. That's it. Now we have Amy Coney Barrett, Coney Barrett being, brought to the Supreme Court. Obviously, the left is not happy that Trump will have made 3 selections for the Supreme Court. And now we have Vice President Biden and Senator Harris flat out refusing to answer whether they will pack the court.
I know.
They will pack the court.
Yes.
They made it very clear that they will pack the court.
Yeah.
So it is political. It's going to keep on being political. And that's, again, and I'm going to bring it back, the last thing I would say about it is to what I said before. This is why pregnancy centers like First Choice are so important. Because in the end, they have been and are still and are going to be the front line in terms of saving children's lives.
The ultrasound machine, 3D and 4D, have made a tremendous difference in abortion rates. What's your feelings on the use of that? And do you think Planned Parenthood and other abortion clinics should be required to show the mother exactly what her baby looks like?
Do I think Planned Parenthood should be required to show an ultrasound? No, not particularly.
Okay.
Now, I will talk about, rather than talk about Planned Parenthood, I'll talk about my own use of ultrasound. When I was doing abortions, every single patient got an ultrasound. This to us is important. This was good medical practice, dedicated as we were to abortion. First, I want to make absolutely certain that the pregnancy is in the uterus. If you have an ectopic pregnancy or a tubal pregnancy, this is very dangerous to that woman. And if you try to perform an abortion on her, she may end up in a world of hurt. And this is particularly important now with medical abortions. It gets a little more off to the side. But second, I wanted to know how far along that pregnancy was and do it accurately. We base everything on last menstrual period, but some women don't know when their last menstrual period was, so there's confusion. Or there can be as much as a month or more discrepancy between how far along she thinks she is and how far she really is. If I'm, as a doctor, dedicated abortionist, doing an abortion, I don't want to do an abortion that I think is 12 weeks along, say, 10 or 12 weeks along, and I find out it's 15 or 16 weeks along. It's a totally different procedure. And I need to be prepared for that, for her safety.
Sure.
So ultrasound is key to that. In pregnancy centers, limited ultrasound is commonly done for the same reasons. We want to make sure she doesn't have an ectopic pregnancy. We want to accurately date her pregnancy. But we want her to see her baby. We want her to see her son or daughter. And it's an interesting thing. Again, people talk about abortion. I talked earlier about when people see an abortion or even hear about it, sometimes it changes their mind.
Sure.
When a mom or a dad see, I'm pregnant, I'm sick, my breasts are sore, I feel crummy,
Right.
but I'm pregnant and I'm going to have a baby. That's one thing. To see that baby on a television screen is quite something else.
Yes.
There is my son, there is my daughter. And it can have a profound effect on the people that see them. And that's the other reason, frankly, why pregnancy centers want to be able to use ultrasound. Ultrasound has been shown to have that effect on patients. When patients see their child, it suddenly, that son or daughter becomes real.
Becomes a real thing to them.
It's a real person to them.
Do you feel that crisis pregnancy centers will continue to be at the forefront of the pro-life movement when there are advances in medicine where there won't be, or you can tell me if this is true or not, where they might not be surgical abortions anymore? RU 486 and other advances, I suppose, are coming along. What's your feeling on what will happen to the rate of abortions when that happens?
The rate of abortions, the number of abortions, let's put it that way, have actually been decreasing as best we know. Now, over in the country per year for the last several years. We used to talk about 1.1, 1.2 million abortions.
I remember, yeah.
Now we're down to something under 1 million. Now, I say it that way because we don't really know how many abortions are being performed. Abortion reporting to the CDC is voluntary. 4 states, and most importantly, one of those states, California, that does probably the largest number of abortions, estimated at over 300,000 a year, do not report their numbers.
Really?
So we have no idea how many abortions are actually being performed. Mm-hmm. But we do know, generally, looking at the research, that the numbers are falling. And the numbers of medical abortions are increasing proportionally.
Yes.
This is where things are now. There's been the abortion side, Clinton, when he was president, he used to say it all the time. We want abortions to be safe, legal, and rare. That was the line. Mm-hmm. Now it's, we want easy access. Now, nobody says it that way, but now it's all about access to abortion. I could show you professional papers from the American College of Obstetrician and Gynecologists and others that talk about abortion access. And the pill, the medical abortion, is the key to this, because suddenly the number of doctors willing to do surgical abortion has been falling for years.
Sure.
But when you've got if you can do an abortion by writing a prescription, well, wait a minute, that's not surgery, that's just writing a prescription.
Right.
Suddenly your pediatrician can do it, your family doctor can do it. And if you listen to some of these sources, you don't even have to be a doctor to do it. But this gets into other problems. National Academy of Science published a paper, a whole book, in 2018. It was financed by several well-heeled foundations that have a long track record of contributing to pro-abortion causes. And it concluded that abortion is totally safe, is with very rare exception, abortion is totally safe. There are no mental problems, there are no mental adverse effects, there are no physical adverse effects, essentially. There is no increased risk of breast cancer or preterm labor from abortion. In fact, it's so safe that it can be done in an office setting with no special equipment required or emergency equipment, and it doesn't have to be performed by physicians. It can be done by nurse practitioners, it can be done by nurse midwives. You don't even have to be a doctor, nor do you have to have admitting privileges in a hospital.
Really?
Now, it's really interesting, because if you look, now we're going to do a medical, remember I talked about ectopic pregnancies?
Yes,
it's a little more technical, but it's important. Ectopic or tubal pregnancies happen relatively frequently. I mean, they are not uncommon.
Yes.
Every doctor sees them very regularly. Various reasons for that we won't get into. If I do a surgical abortion, maybe I didn't do an ultrasound. In our practice, I said we always did an abortion, or when we were going to do an abortion, we always did an ultrasound. I want to make sure that the pregnancy is in the uterus. I want to know how far along she is. I know she doesn't have an ectopic because I've seen the pregnancy in the uterus. But if I haven't done that and I do a surgical abortion, I put my instruments in, I take the tissue out of the uterus, I send it to a lab. You better hope they do. They should. And then you get a report back. Products of conception seen. Okay, there was the pregnancy, I got it. We're good. But if I get a report, and I got more than one of these when I was doing abortions, no products of conception seen, red flag, this could be a tubal pregnancy.
Yeah.
If you do a medical abortion and you don't rule out ectopic pregnancy, and the only way I know of doing that is to do an ultrasound. If you don't do that and you give her those drugs, she'll bleed, she'll cramp, she thinks she's had her abortion. And women have died of ruptured ectopic abortions with the medical protocol because they had undiagnosed ectopic pregnancies. This is one danger. Yet, this National Academy of Sciences in its wisdom says, oh, you don't need any special equipment. You don't need to do an ultrasound. You don't even have to be a doctor or have hospital privileges. Now, that's important too. Imagine...
if something goes wrong...
If you're a member of the audience, imagine for a minute you have your appendix out. And 3 days later, you've got a fever, you've got severe pain, there's pus draining from one of the incisions.
Right.
You've got a problem.
You sure do.
So who do you think should be taking care of that complication?
The doctor.
Wouldn't it be the surgeon that you paid money to take care of you?
Yes.
You as a patient have a right to be taken care of by the very same person that caused the problem. But when abortionists are sitting there with, well, I don't need admitting privileges in a hospital. So instead now maybe from your abortion you have a problem. You're running a fever, you have pain, you're bleeding more heavily than you should. And you get on the phone, and too commonly from many clinics, you get on the phone at 3 in the morning, oh, if you're having an emergency, go to the emergency room. These patients are being dumped into emergency rooms, and the person that did the abortion and collected money to do that procedure is nowhere to be found. This is not good medicine.
That's unprofessional. Yes.
In my opinion, it's very unprofessional.
Yes.
You have to, if you're going to do a procedure, you have to be prepared to deal with the complications of that procedure. No matter how rare those complications might be, it's still your obligation to take care of them.
Yes.
Or at least arrange for someone else to take care of them for you.
Yes. I want to follow up on that. We need to take another brief break, come back and do another short segment, and give people an opportunity to help First Choice Pregnancy Services. We'll be back with Dr. Anthony Levatino right after this. Welcome back to Las Vegas Tonight. I'm your host, Dale Davidson. What a great show we have. Dr. Anthony Levatino has been with us, former abortionist. He is so pro-life now. He was in a movie. He starred in a movie.
Like 2 minutes and 50 seconds of fame that took 7 hours to shoot on set.
Isn't that always the way? It's incredible. For those people who think television and movies are exciting, really not. There's a lot of standing around and sitting around, but you did a great job in the movie.
Thank you.
Let's talk. I want to follow up a little bit more on what you said about hospital privileges. The case ended up before the Supreme Court that was requiring that a doctor be present for the possibility of a baby being born alive. And my understanding is the court overturned that. What's your feelings on that as a possibly something that should be required, or should we hope that the Supreme Court changes their mind? What's your attitude on that?
English law, American law, common law. Dale, are you a human being?
Yes, I am.
How do I know?
Because I say so, I guess.
Yeah, well, no, you're a human being by virtue of science.
Yeah.
It's a definition. You're a certain animal that looks this way.
Yeah.
Are you a person, Dale?
Yes, I am.
How do I know?
Same reasons, I think.
But it's not science that makes you a person. It's law.
Oh, okay.
And what does a person have that's different? Rights.
Yes.
When did you acquire your rights, Dale?
I believe at conception.
Yeah, but not the court.
Yes.
Nor does English or American common law. You acquired your rights when you were born.
Yes.
Once you are born, you are a person, and you are a person under the law with rights.
Right.
And that includes the right to life.
Right.
No question once you're born.
Right.
Yet we have the governor of Virginia calmly talking on a radio interview about how if a baby is born with some birth defect or something, then we just, calmly, quote, make the baby comfortable, which I guess means wrap them in a blanket, and then sit there and let them die. No, that's a person. That person has rights. There shouldn't even be a discussion about treating children that are born alive. I'm sorry if I understand that the mom and maybe dad wanted that baby dead, and that's harsh, but that's the reality of it.
Yes.
And I'm sorry that you paid a doctor to accomplish that, and the doctor was so incompetent that they didn't manage to do that. But if that child is born alive, that child is a person under the law with rights and deserves full care, period.
But the Born Alive Act specified that a physician has to be present for that eventuality, right? What's your feeling on that?
The Born Alive Act, yeah, that a physician, that it mandated that child do get that care.
Right.
That just tells you right where we are, just the fact that they feel they have to pass a law which does nothing but uphold centuries-old common law.
Right.
That tells you exactly where we are with abortion in this country.
Yes. Here in Nevada and in other states, there have been attempts to create a constitutional amendment, state amendment, that called for personhood of a preborn baby. What's your feeling on that? Well,
this isn't as I said, the way the law sits now, personhood is suddenly comes into existence at birth.
Right.
If a preborn human being, that child, had personhood sometime during gestation, then they would be protected under the law. Yes. And that's exactly why those kind of laws are being forwarded by some legislators to try to accomplish that, just that.
Yes.
To limit it. As I said, the Democratic Party especially, sorry folks, but it's reality, has gone from safe, legal, and rare to any abortion, any time, for any reason, up to, and God forbid, maybe even beyond birth.
Yes. Something like 3/4 of all Americans believe that late-term abortions ought to be outlawed. And then, it trails off depending on the second trimester, the first trimester, that sort of thing. Would you go along with a common sense approach whereby a law would say there can be no third trimester abortions, there can only be second trimester abortions up to a certain period? What's your feeling on that? Is that an interim step?
Well, yes. Laws like that have been passed by various states. I've testified in court cases in a number of states, that passed laws stating exactly that.
Right.
The original Roe versus Wade decision in '73 was based on that trimester framework we were talking about.
Yes, right.
And it said that in the third trimester, a state could make abortion illegal because the child was then viable. That's why that third trimester restriction, as it were, was placed in Roe versus Wade. That changed with Planned Parenthood versus Casey. Now the standard is undue burden, which is very vague. It's very vague, and it was intentionally vague. And the problem is also then that viability, that was viability, 27 weeks in 1973. Medical science hasn't stood still. Viability now is down to 22. The World Health Organization recognizes 22 weeks as viable.
Wow.
So
less than 6 months.
Should you be allowed to, so the question becomes, should a woman be allowed, should a doctor be allowed to perform an abortion on a viable, healthy child? Once that child is viable, I understand for any number of reasons you may not wish to be pregnant. And I want to make sure people understand, I'm not talking about cases where there are medical emergencies. That's a whole different story.
Right.
I worked in a tertiary referral center. I've done hundreds of deliveries to save women's lives because bad things can happen in pregnancy. But I told people I did that for 10 years, delivered hundreds of babies prematurely to save moms' lives. How many babies did I have to deliberately kill in the process? The answer was 0.
Right.
It's not an abortion. You do a delivery, not an abortion. An abortion is intended to kill the child. So if the child is viable and healthy, let's use that as a starting point, then okay, you want to end the pregnancy, but the baby's born alive and maybe that baby can be adopted. Believe me, that baby can be adopted.
Yeah.
So it gets very complicated, it gets very messy. And that whole problem, as I said, as viability gets younger and younger and younger, this is where the arguments come.
Yes, and to me, it will always be a hard issue and not a political issue. To me, it's the parents, the mom and dad. I believe that a father should have something to say about this. I believe that the girl's parents, if she's a young girl, should have something to say about it. And I believe that the Lord Almighty has something to say about this. And so I truly appreciate the work that you're doing. I truly appreciate that you are going about this country talking to people about what abortion truly is and what it looks like. It's a great service.
Well, it's very kind of you. I tell people it's so easy to talk about ending someone else's life.
Yes.
And I would tell anybody listening, today you're an adult.
Yes.
Once upon a time you were a child. You didn't look anything like you look today.
That's right.
Once you were a baby. Once you were this big.
Yes.
But it was always you.
Yes. Thank you. That's very well said. And thank you for coming on the show.
You're
so
welcome.
appreciate it. God bless you.
God bless.
Dr. Anthony Levatino, a terrific man, terrific doctor, and boy, he has a great heart. I want to take just a moment to ask you to support the local here in Las Vegas pregnancy center, crisis pregnancy center. It's called First Choice Pregnancy Services. It is the busiest crisis pregnancy center in the world. They have saved more than 33,000 babies. You can help them. You can volunteer. You can send them a check at fcpsfriends.org, fcpsfriends.org. We'll put all that information up down here on the screen. Or you can call them at 702-294-2273, 702-294-2273. God bless you, and walk with Him.
Don't worry. Why? Look at the birds in the air. Don't worry. Don't worry. Don't.
Come on and shine, shine, shine. Las Vegas, shine your light on me.
You've been watching Las Vegas Tonight with your host, Dale Davidson. We hope you've enjoyed this edition of our show. We so appreciate your loyalty to our program. To keep Las Vegas Tonight on the air, please go to our website, vegassaints.org, and click the Donate button. To send a check or money order, please make it out to Dale Wynn Davidson Ministries and mail it to 9030 West Sahara Avenue, Suite 255, Las Vegas, Nevada, 89117. To suggest a guest to appear on the show or any other suggestions or questions, write to Dale at dalewdavidson@yahoo.com or call him at 702-480-3989.
Shine, Las Vegas, shine your light on me.
Traditional TV is going away. Hollywood is starting to fade. People are demanding real stories from real people. Our voices are now being heard in our own way. Podcasts, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok Live are becoming the norm. Internet TV has now reached the highest demand in human history. Social media shows is now the new media of the century.
What affects your credit? The answer can be many things. Let's take a look at a few of the most common factors and how they can impact your credit. Credit history. In order to have a credit score, you need to have open and active credit accounts. This gives you the opportunity to build a credit score and get approved for larger purchases such as a car or a home. So it's important to have a responsible record of debt repayment. Available credit and usage. The rule of thumb is to use 30% of your available credit to minimize the impact of debt on your credit score. In other words, the less credit you use, the better. Monthly on-time payments. By making sure your monthly payments are paid on time, you could boost your credit score. Late payments, however, may bring your score down. Errors on your credit report. Check your credit report regularly to make sure it's accurate. If there are any errors or signs of identity theft, report them immediately to the appropriate credit bureau. Applications for credit. If you're applying for credit, filling out several applications in a short amount of time may hurt your credit score. It's ideal to keep the applications to a minimum. However, there is an allowable shopping window for a mortgage. Remember, a good credit score could possibly save you in interest payments. If your credit score needs some improvement, however, consider starting with the basics mentioned here. And when you're ready to buy your dream home, give New American Funding a call. We'll help you find a home loan that works for you and your unique situation.